So shall we get started?
Yeah.
On a hot, sunny summer afternoon. And I'm actually very, very privileged to be sitting here with this panel, who is covering demographics, different industries, different geographies. And I think this is a wonderful moment to also acknowledge that in today's disruptive and dynamic world, the influence of advertising on social attitudes, perceptions, and behaviors cannot be underestimated. And I'm just going back a little in time. When I was a teenager and growing up in India, there was an advertisement from a product called Fair and Lovely by Hindustan Unilever. And this was primarily targeted towards young girls and women. And it was all about portraying the fairer skin as a ticket to success. Coming of being darker skin and someone who wanted to actually pursue engineering and not tie the proverbial knot, this advertisement had a huge influence on me in how my perceptions were actually formed and how I thought that the fairer skin was so important. And the other thing the advertisement portrayed was that marriage was the single most important milestone in a woman's life. So I do believe that advertising has got a huge influence on how our perceptions are shaped. And again, as I said, I'm very, very delighted that we have a range of experts here. And I'm actually going to start with Ayati, who's the youngest, and can you believe she's just 10 years old? And Ayati, I'm going to ask you, are you Gen Z or Gen Alpha? You're Gen Z, okay. So I'm going to ask you this question. There's a lot of advertisements that is bombarded at young girls like you. And what's your perception on these advertisements or the messages that land on you? And how do you think we can leverage these messages better in terms of shaping young girls like you?
So I think advertising is about turning our attention to take action and to solve the problems around us. And as a fifth grade student, I know young girls in my grade take media trends very seriously. So there was this trend in fourth grade that young girls would bring those things that make your nails even and use it on their teeth to avoid bullying. And I got bullied for not doing the trend, and then they were like, oh, you're a pig, and I got called names for it. And then I wrote something to empower myself. And if I was an advertiser, I would say that even if my teeth are uneven, magic in me is weaving. And I think we should think about it differently and turning the perception and turning our attention differently about young girls. And another example is that I was riding my bike and I fell and I got scars and I got bullied for it. And I'm like, and I would go to school and I got called names for it all over again. And then these are natural to get scars, and these are not my scars. This is my story and the story of many other young girls who are learning new things, playing games, and getting scars, and we shouldn't get bullied for it. And we are not labels. We are meant to be legends. And I think that is how we should think about Gen Z. And I think the bottom line comes down to this, is that girls' abuse and discrimination remains unrecognized, but it still exists. Girls' stereotyping remains unrecognized, but it still exists. And that is why it's time for advertisers to turn their attention on young voices differently. And the problem with baby boomers is that they're raising their hands to say, hey, there's a problem out there. Is there a solution? But Gen Z and Gen Alpha know they're going to raise their hands to say, there's a problem out there, I'm going to fix it. And I'm going to fix it, and that is what I'm doing here today with the book Lead Her, which is about 60 women leading change in 60 different ways, solving 60 different problems, and being the change that they want to see in this world. And thank you. That they want to see in this world, and that is what I'm doing here today. And I think that is how Gen Z and Gen Alpha, the message lands differently.
Thanks so much, Ayati. And as always, very, very powerful. And, that brings me to the role that advertising plays. And we have all of you experts. And I'm going to ask Josie and Lisa this question. You've heard how the messages land. And both of you have actually done some wonderful work around breaking stereotypes and social norms. So, it would be great for us to hear some of the work that you've done and how you have approached it and what has been the impact of those work that you have done. Josie, why don't you start first?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm Josie Paul, and I work for this agency called BBDO India, and we do a lot of work for P&G. In 2014-15, we were approached by P&G Whisper, the sanitary napkin brand, to do a campaign for them. But as we were talking with the young women at P&G, one of the questions I asked them is, why are you showing blood as blue when blood is not blue? And all these years as a kid and in college, I've been seeing that. Now you call us to do this work. So it was a bit of a provocation. They had already briefed us, but I thought we should provoke them a little. And what was amazing was the P&G people were so open to that conversation. They said, oh, what you're saying is nothing, Josie. You have no clue what we women go through. And they spoke about all the other sort of taboos that were existing in India at that time. This was 2014, 2015. They said, do you know that we can't sleep on the bed? We've got to sleep on the floor in many parts of the country. Do you know that we can't go into the kitchen on those days? Do you know that we can't even touch the pickle jar? And I was quite shocked. We went back to the agency. We sort of discussed these things. When we came back, we said, listen, we have got something beautiful from that session that happened after your brief. And what you told us is so powerful that you don't need any creative idea. You've already given us the idea. And so we said, what if we create a platform called Touch the Pickle? It was, in a way, a silent protest. It was a form of dissent. Yeah? And we said, if we create that platform on digital and get women to challenge and question period taboos, then something could happen. But what was amazing was we had hardly started the campaign that it turned into a people's movement. Women across the country picked that up and made it their own. Volunteers, ambassadors, partners, influencers, everyone came forward willingly, and suddenly something that was not spoken about became a huge sort of talking point, which actually then went on to affect other sort of situations in the country. Yeah, so it was a long tail of action and activism that started from a very simple thought, touch the pickle. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Lisa.
Yes, hi. I'm Lisa Rosenberg, and I work for a Stagwell agency called Allison & Partners. And I was thinking a lot about this question and examples of work that I've done over the years. And I think when you think about equity and inclusivity, you have to think quite broadly. And I wanted to share a few examples today. The first is a campaign that we worked on with Budweiser. And when you think about the brewing industry, you typically think that the brewing industry is male. And this campaign centered around the first female senior Black women's brewer. Her name is Natalie Johnson. And what we had uncovered was that there was a huge gap in Black and Hispanic students actually completing degrees in STEM. So science and technology and math, all key qualifications if you were going to go into the brewing industry. And what we set out to do was to really increase representation in the industry. And by to do this, we actually built a scholarship in Natalie's name in partnership with a longtime AB partner, the United Negro College Foundation, or College Fund. and created a scholarship in her name. And the way we activated and brought it to life was incredibly powerful. Budweiser had a long-standing partnership with a basketball legend, Dwayne Wade. He was actually a co-founder of their non-alcoholic brew. And so we had him in a very moving piece of content share her story, talk about her story, and present her with this scholarship that was created in her name. And the scholarship came also with the potential for internships at the brewer for students. We had 25 students who were recipients the first year. They pledged over $1 million. And they really wanted to impact change and not just raise awareness of the issue. So that was one campaign that I thought did a very good job, and something that sort of touched upon so many of the issues that face all of us when we talk about equity and inclusion. And then I wanted to also just mention, part of our challenge as marketers is not to reinforce stereotypes. So when you bring stories to life, that in your storytelling, you have to make sure you're challenging the assumptions. So a piece of work we did for Denny's, for example, around Father's Day, portrayed the relationship between a Black father and son in a very positive and uplifting manner, which, defies how the relationship between Black men and their children are often portrayed in media. Another example is some work we did for Progressive Insurance, where we challenged the notion of what a traditional family looks like. There's a new campaign called Replay, and particularly in America, a family is a man, a woman, children, 2 cars. But in this case, the parents were a same-sex couple. So again, how you storytell and how you break down stereotypes, I think, is on all of us in this industry in order to change the conversation, the dialogue, and to move us forward.
And I absolutely love what you're saying. And, I think you touched upon 2 things that's also very close to my heart. One is equity. And the second is intersectionality. Because every time we talk about diversity, we always think of men and women. So we don't necessarily talk about equity, nor do we talk about intersectionality. And I absolutely love what you said, especially on the beer part. Every time you think about alcoholic beverages, you only think men. Right? So we are also all women, I can say, for the group here at least, all of us are also connoisseurs of wine and cocktails, right? So I'm actually going to ask you this question in terms of, just building on what Lisa said, in terms of how these messages land, because I think that's so powerful since we, especially with social media, and we watch a lot of advertisements, and there's a lot of messaging coming across through those advertisements. So how do you make sure that these messages are inclusive, and especially around the intersectionality part, representative of all communities? And you have done some amazing work around that. Why don't you just talk us through some of those examples?
Hi everyone, I'm Sue Uniman. I'm Chief Transformation Officer at Essence Mediacom. And it's a great question. And I think Lisa and Josie and IRT have already answered it, really, which is you have to be conscious, you have to be active, you have to specifically make sure that you are being inclusive. So Group M, which is the holding company for the media agency that I work for, has a conscious policy of making media money work for good, which means that we are working with social media companies to influence them, and we've got a lot of influence. It means that we have an inclusive planning process that I'm really proud that I worked on, whereby we work with clients to introduce them to minority-owned media channels to do specific partnerships for good. So I can give you one example of that, which was Tesco's very first partnership, Tesco, a big UK supermarket, their very first partnership with the Gay Times in the UK for Valentine's Day. It was a big change for them, and the start of other work that then followed. But I think the other campaign that I have to mention, because it won the Media Grand Prix this year, which comes from WPP companies Ogilvy and Mindshare is the Dove Turn Your Back campaign. So this was an amazing campaign. If you haven't seen it, take a look for it, which reacted immediately with the strong heritage that Dove has got to campaign for real beauty for women and girls, so not to show just kind of like fake images. And when the new TikTok filter came out that was like so good that you couldn't tell that there was a filter, there's so many women and so many people reacted to it and said, this is just making things worse. None of us can look like this in real life. If what we're doing is portraying ourselves on social media like this, we're actually just going to make everybody miserable. And so they initiated the Turn Your Back campaign, which was basically nobody was putting their face on there so that it could be used by AI to generate those filters. But women around the world turned their back. And then some celebs got involved and turned their back. And it starts to make a difference because we all often, when we're having a bad time, when we're not included, when we're bullied, when things go wrong, we think it's us. And actually what we need to do is share those experiences over and over again. And we can use AI and we can use tech for good. So you've already talked about an Always campaign. We work with Always in Israel, in the very religious Jewish community there. A woman is not allowed to even touch her partner until she is completely clear of her period. And traditionally, and this has now been going on for thousands of years, people, women, young women, sometimes very young women, had to show their pads to the rabbi so that the rabbi could tell them, yeah, all right, you're clear. You can go home. And you just imagine how that feels. So Always worked with the rabbinical community, and Essence Mediacom created what we called the Rabbi Bot, which was an app where a woman just scanned her pad. It was approved by the extreme Jewish community, and it meant that they got the all clear, and then they could go about their lives. So I think over and over again, we've got people who want to make a difference. And if we all get together and get behind each other, then we can change this for the better.
Thanks, Sue. Really. Yes.
I want to add to that because young girls' voices are not represented in media really well. And I love doing creative stuff, and my family labeled me that you're artistic, but you're not analytical. Some of my family members said that, and I was like, I'm a 5th grade student and I'm competing for 7th grade math. Like, what are you talking about? And I just wanted to say that we're not represented in media and it's time to change that.
It's totally trying to change that. And I have 2 beautiful grown-up daughters. When they were both at university, people would say, what are they doing? And I'd say, oh, my eldest, she's doing English. And they go, yeah, she's clever. And then I'd say, my youngest, she's doing maths at university. And they'd go, really? I mean, like, it's the 2020s, people. Yeah.
Yeah, I can so relate to that. I studied engineering and I was the only girl in my class. We are talking about 25 years back. I did my master's and I was still the only girl in my class. And the good thing was that all the boys went gaga over you, right? Because you were a minority. And you joined the workforce and you're still the only woman. And you are absolutely right. We are living in which century are we living in, right? These narratives have to change. And talking about social media, and so you touched upon that and how it all lands. Santhi, I have a question for you, because you represent one of the largest creator platforms, if I can call it that way. And the creator economy has got both pros and cons. I think the pro is that each one of us can actually change the narrative or add to the narrative. So what's your view on that, and how are you actually ensuring that the creator economy is not propagating these biases, but in a way contributing to breaking these biases?
Hi. So I work at Pinterest, and one of the specific things we're doing in regards to the creator economy is to really further equity is that we set up a creator fund actually for people from diverse backgrounds. So they have the support from us financially to kind of further their work on our platform. And Pinterest is really deeply committed to pulling down these stereotypes, pulling down barriers. We have diverse search filters built into the platform. So when you're searching a hairstyle, it pulls up a range of, we call it hair pattern filter. So everything from coily, protective, straight, bald, all the different ways that you can search our platform just for you. And same goes with skin tone. So if you're searching for great nail art, you can search by your own skin tone to find looks that work for you. So we're pretty deeply invested in making things right.
Fantastic. And I don't know if any of you want to chip in, because we truly living in a creator economy, right? And as I said, there are pros and cons. There's a massive potential in all of us, independent of whether what professions we come in, whether it's media, whether it's branding, whether it's advertising, all of us can actually contribute to that. So I don't know, Josie, Lisa, if you want to share something.
I have actually two really different examples where we talk about the use of creators or influencers. But I want to sort of, when you think about brands using creators and working with creators, it's great if they work with a diverse set of creators. It's even better if it's purposeful and tied into the brand in an authentic way. So just this year, we introduced for Kimpton, part of IHG Hotels, a global creator collective. And what it was based on and sort of where the insight came from was this research we had done that showed that most consumers felt like travel content and travel imagery did not reflect them. Basically, you would see images of beautiful women in a bikini holding an Aperol spritz. I mean, and I'm oversimplifying, but that is how consumers viewed the content that was being put out by travel brands. And what we set out to do was to create a group or a collective of voices who could bring to life what travel looks like from all walks of life, from all different perspectives. And the collective features or included people, when we talk about the intersexuality of diversity, it was people of different abilities, people of different sexes, of different races, so that they could bring to life how they experience travel so that people could relate to the content and the imagery that they saw. And it was a highly effective program. Kimpton then went on to make a pledge that all the content they put out, this was part of their Stay Human mantra, was going to be reflective of this diversity of thought, this diversity of imagery, which I think is incredibly powerful. Another brand that we do a lot of work with, and many of you may not be familiar with this brand, but it is a brand called Dexcom. It is a continuous glucose monitor for people who are diabetic. And when you think about people with disabilities, a lot of times people think that people who have disabilities are unable to do things that others are able to do. And Dexcom believed in the power of real stories and real voices early on. And they built a community that we call the Warriors. It started off with just a handful of people who wore the Dexcom monitor and who are diabetic. And it's now over 40,000 people globally. And these are the people who Dexcom features in their advertising, features in their content. These are the stories we bring to life. And what we try to do is show up in unexpected places where you wouldn't necessarily think about diabetes to help normalize the conversation. So some of the big activations that the brand has done, this was our second year at the Super Bowl. They have a partnership with Nick Jonas, who is type 2 diabetic and wears the Dexcom, to showing up at South by Southwest and other places to start to normalize the conversation around a disability which doesn't really change who people are. And I think that's what's so important. If you bring diverse viewpoints, diverse people to the forefront in an authentic way, you can start to normalize and create a world where equity can thrive.
Can we talk about generative AI?
Sure. And that's something that popped into my mind as Lisa was talking. We are
me
talking
too.
a lot about inclusion. And, when you think of inclusive marketing, it's still human minds. And, as human minds, we have a power to react and respond, which is exactly, when you talk about the IHG campaign, hotels campaign that you did. But, this is exactly the biases that we actually take onto the digital world, right? So I'm absolutely looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are at the start of the generative AI impact on our working lives and on culture and on civilization in general. This time next year, I mean, think how fast it's moved since Christmas. This time next year, I can't imagine, but it will have moved fast again. And what we know at the moment is that what generative AI and fast learning, large learning models are learning, they're learning the biases that are already in the system, or that it's been trained to learn by the people who are the engineers, who are not as diverse as the set of people on this beach. So I heard one example yesterday. We've got at WPP some AI apprentices that we've employed. And one of them is this amazing woman called Adelaide, who works in the basement of Sea Container's house in London. And she was looking to create some artwork for some advertising. And she was looking for hair. She's a woman of color. She was looking for hair that looked like her hair. And part of a team that was doing it, everybody else took 2 minutes. She's still looking 4 hours later. And in the end, what she had to do, and I don't really even understand how she was able to do this, but she did say she's a mother of a daughter, so I guess braiding her daughter's hair is quite tricky too. But what she did was she braided hair in virtual reality so that she could create the asset for the large learning model to use in the work. It baffles me that those biases are so strong already, and it worries me, and I guess we all need to join in with this, otherwise it's just going to carry on, right?
Yeah, and Sante, I know you have also worked on some of these, I don't want to necessarily call it generative AI, but a lot of work around the imagery, how we actually, change the biases using imagery. So do you want to talk about that?
Well, I think the other point is accountability, right? So measurement. And I think if what we do is actually start at scale measuring not just who's in front of the camera, not who's just showing up in ads, because to be honest, what will happen is you will get served an ad much, much more that contains in it someone that looks like you. That will happen. That's what AI is going to do. Everything is going to be more personalized. And actually, in that sense, you might feel happier. You might feel more included. But my big question is, who's behind the cameras? Who's in the production shoots? Who's actually writing those kind of ideas? Because there's been quite a lot of work about who shows up on screen, but not as much at who's behind the screens. And I'm part of a consortium that's been working on this for a couple of years, and we hope to come out with something for this industry very soon, because one of the other things that we need to acknowledge, because the great thing about Cannes is this is a worldwide festival, is that feelings around the world are not the same. And if you ask TikTok, as my CEO of Group M said this week, if you ask TikTok about that filter, they go, well, in some markets, that's what people want. And in some markets, it's illegal to measure whether someone is LGBTQ+, because if you're LGBTQ+, you're going to get arrested. So it's a very complex situation, and I think we just all have to kind of think, how do we fix this and be very conscious of it?
Sante, would you like to talk about the imagery?
I really don't have a lot to add to what she said. I thought that really covered it. I mean, all I keep thinking about this week was something someone said to me, which was AI is only as good as the artist and the input. So that's what I'm coming back from Cannes, and we were already starting to think about this, but we're starting to use it in our daily life as creatives, and making sure that, to your point, we build it if it's not there. I thought the hair braiding example was great. I'll take that home to the team. So it's going to be a lot of work, and like you said, it's going to change so much between now and December if it already changed so much. So we've got to be really, really careful in the next 6 months to get it right.
You know, staying on the topic, because generative AI is one of the hottest topic, and I would say in parallel, the next hottest topic, which has got similar attention, is metaverse. And we have with us the creator of Queendom in metaverse. So the question is actually for you. I know you've been, and it's amazing what you've been doing on metaverse and how you have been challenging some of the stereotypes. So my question is more around, one, what made you start all of this? And second is, where are you headed? And what do you think metaverse can actually do in terms of breaking some of the social norms?
So thank you for asking the question about the metaverse, because I am the co-founder of Queendom Metaverse, which gives young girls between the age of 10 to 18 access to coaching, capital, community, have access to commerce opportunities, and showcase their creativity. And young girls in this platform come together and create spaces. And talking about creating spaces, I want to thank Miss Adrienne Smith for creating the space and being the queen of this. And I want to give a big round of applause for her. So I think it can challenge social norms, because it can help accelerate for an equal future. Because then young girls, imagine a young girl who has come from Afghanistan, India, or where wars are happening, and they don't know where they belong. And they don't feel like they belong somewhere. They feel like they're left behind. They fear that they will be seen as refugees, and they fear that they will be seen as they will be not included. Well, that is where the Queendom Metaverse plays the role, because when young girls feel like they don't belong, they come to the Queendom Metaverse, and if they design an online bedroom in the metaverse, they become a designer. If they create a gallery and they put their art in it, they become an artist. If they design an online store, sell their products in it, they become an entrepreneur. There are so many possibilities, and I think it's time to unlock those possibilities and think we are beyond those labels and beyond that stereotype, and that is how I think metaverse can help break social norms. Yeah.
I mean, I just want to add to that, because you are super inspirational. Last year, I saw Paris Hilton talk about the metaverse as well, and she was very inspirational as well. And she said, you know what, women, it was at the FQ Lounge, she said, so it was mainly an audience of women. She said, you know what, ladies, she said, if we leave it to the boys, if we don't get involved in this, then we're just going to be, in like a year's time, we're going to be going, well, it's not fair, it's not right. You have to get involved, right?
Yeah, and this brings me back, and Josie, I'm going to ask you this question, because every time we talk about inclusive societies and inclusive, again, coming back to advertising itself, India is also one of those boiling pot countries, if we can call it. There are so many of those intersections. It's not just the gender parity that we are talking about. It's not just the gender stereotypes that we are talking about. There's so many of those intersectionalities. And you have done some amazing work in inclusive advertising. I would love to hear about some of those examples of how you have, again, the journey around it. And if I, again, look at the team, it's a very inclusive team. And plus, the messages that you have delivered have been very inclusive. So just run us through the journey.
Okay, let me try and make sense. I'm not 100% sure if my answer is going to be right. But way back in 2015, P&G came to us with a brand called Ariel. It's a detergent brand, laundry brand. And they said, we've got to make this brand more desirable because they were number 5 in the category. And at that time, we had a process called creative therapy. We bring people into a room and we just talk about our lives, especially when it comes to household chores. And it's quite an intense session because it's not about insights, it's about confessions. We create a safe space. It's called the white room. Everything is white in that room. It's just something happens to you when you sit in that room. You feel like sharing because you feel safe with one another. And in the course of the conversation, as we were talking about household chores and laundry, and not about brands, just about what happens in the home, one of the girls said, I have some data that I want to share with you, which is that in an Indian household, at an average, a woman does 5 hours of household work, while a man does only 19 minutes a day. 5 hours a day was 19 minutes. And for us, injustice was staring us in the face. And it's quite an emotional session, these things. And like I said, we call it creative therapy, and it's really something we went back to the client and we said, you've given us this proposition that Ariel washes the toughest stains in just one wash, and that's your brief. But we'd like to rearrange that brief. And we say Ariel washes the toughest stains in just one wash, and anyone can do it. And anyone can do it. The moment we added that, it just changed the equation. And then we asked a very provocative question to society, which is laundry only a woman's job? Yeah? It was such a simple question. You didn't need a copywriter to write that. You didn't need creativity to write that. You needed sensitivity to write it. You needed empathy to write it. And that statement, with a very short digital 30-second film, actually stormed the country. And it created a sort of national movement again. And I think we tend to touch and provoke things where we feel we need. I mean, we call it social disobedience. I feel that sometimes the idea of authority has to be given way to the authority of ideas. And this really was that starting point. And every year then, and it's now a 8-year-long campaign, every year we find a new insight and, more importantly, a new confession. And the thing about confession is that it's so personal and so deep that when it's that deep, it's also universal, because everyone feels the same way about it. But it's really digging deep. So one of the questions we asked was, are you teaching your sons what you've been teaching your daughters? And that was a year's campaign. And every year something happens which sort of helps people reevaluate what's happening at home. Another time we asked the question, how come men share the load with other men? Especially when you're staying as partners or as roommates or, whatever. But you never share it with your wife. So these are the questions we ask. And this year we asked another provocative question, which it'll take a little while for me to explain. But yeah, in the end of 8 years, when we did our research, we had found something magic, which is that when we began, 79% men believed that laundry is only a woman's job. Today, that number is down to 26%.
That's just amazing.
Thank you.
It's like so important. It's so amazing. Do you know about the little clothing label thing?
Yeah, I did that clothing label.
Yeah, I love it. So they also with one chain of clothing shops, they changed the clothing label so that it's when it tells you how to do the washing instructions. 40 degrees or whatever, it said can be washed by men or women. I just
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, and personally, I have to say, allow the example you gave on Ariel. My husband is in the audience, and I can very, very proudly say the advertisement had a huge impact on our household. My husband does the laundry, and so does my 15-year-old teenage boy, because it is easy. Because up until then, that the social norm was that it's not just that the laundry is a woman's job, it's also hard, and you needed expertise on that. So I'm extremely happy that you used that example, because it had a direct impact on how we perceive things.
Thank you, Sue, for bringing that up. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think we have established, and with sharing the stories around the different campaigns that you're doing, and the demographics as well, right, from a 10-year-old to our generation, how advertising can actually help change the norms. I think the dangerous part is also, especially with the technology playing a huge role in everything that we do, how advertising can also not change the norms and propagate some of this. So my question, and I'm gonna pose this to all of you, Josie, starting with you and ending with the youngest on the panel. You are all media, branding, advertising professionals, but at the same time, you're also consumers. You have power in your hands. So how will you make the dream that we have of an equal future a reality, both from an advertising perspective and as consumers?
You want to go first?
It's a great question, and I've actually been thinking about it since Sue was talking about AI and how we're going to be fed only content or mostly content that's reflective of ourselves. And I think there is a challenge in that, because if we're not exposed to things that don't look like us, how can we possibly open our eyes? So I think while I have great appreciation for consumers wanting to be able to relate to content that feels like them, or to see advertising that speaks to who they are, I think we have to equally look at things that are reflective of others in order to create the kind of society and world where things are equitable. So that's sort of I'm curious where AI takes us, Sue, because I think we don't want to wind up more narrow. I think we want to keep our viewpoint broad. So.
Just building on that, maybe this is very simple or simplistic, but I think before we get to equality, we have to be able to listen. There's got to be an element of empathy that allows us to understand what's going on. And I call it deep listening or radical empathy. And when you receive it, when empathy becomes a part of you, the need for equality comes naturally. You don't have to fight for it anymore. You feel it. And there was a time I would say creativity is about connections. You take two things and two different things and connect it, and people say, hey, you're so clever, you're amazing, you're creative. And then over time, I started feeling differently about the world and about what creativity is. And today I say creativity is sensitivity in a world where no one is listening. And for me, if it starts with listening, we will automatically move towards a more equal world. That's what I feel.
Thank you. Sue?
I think I'm going to continue to do what I've been trying to do, which is what we should all do, which is check your circle. Who's in your circle? Who's in the team? Who are you talking to? Does everybody look and sound different? I am sick to whatever of people going, we've got this campaign, we're intending it to be inclusive, and there's everybody in the room looks the same. And you go, but everybody in the room looks the same. It doesn't. You haven't got any. There's one particular example, which is we haven't got anyone of the Muslim community in this room. Oh, we checked. We've got somebody junior in the office. We checked with them. Like, no, you need a team where people can have different views. If consensus comes too easily, in my view, so I mean, empathy, good, but if consensus comes too easily, then you're not working hard enough. So make sure that you've got different people in your circle. And the other thing is that I'm convinced of. I mean, I'm going to be 62 years old in a month. I could easily be going, oh, technology, that's not for me. I am not going to do that. I am going to be getting in there with the 10-year-olds and making and finding out and trying things out and trying to influence. And I think that's what we've all got to do, yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, one of the reasons I left the agency side was I wanted to get closer to product. So I spent 14 years agency side before I left for Google. And at Google, I had the good fortune of working on Real Tone for Pixel that won the Grand Prix last year. It was not my idea, but I did help all the communications around the product innovation. And it was led by someone named Florian, who, I love this guy. He started as an intern at Google, and he read a New York Times article that said camera technology is not calibrated. It was for people with darker skin tones. And he made it his mission to work with camera teams to innovate, to make this better. And I was so inspired by it. And I remember when he took me through it for the first time, and we talked about the ways to communicate this to the world, that was my best moment at Google by far. I was there for 5 years. And I was most inspired because I felt like, okay, I can help communicate this. I can't do it alone. I also have to build a team, talk to experts, talk to people from these backgrounds to help tell this story. So to your point about assembling the right team, I've really made that core to how I work and how I'll work at Pinterest. I've been here for 8 months. And one of the most exciting things are really our skin tone filters, our how we're going to treat differences in body shape and size. I mean, women are big users of Pinterest. And so I can't wait to sit much closer to product and use what I know about marketing and what will resonate to help us build better products. That's where I see my career going, is literally influencing the product. So I think if we could all do anything, it's actually building it in versus just over-rotating on the messaging around it. I think it has to be ground up.
So I think young girls can participate in that by thinking that they have the courage and creativity to make the change, and we are in charge of our future. And I think it's time to break the stereotype that we're artistic, but oh well, but you're not analytical, because young girls in my grade do a lot of art and do a lot of creative stuff, and it's not fair to break their dreams and ambitions. And I think we should see the change that we want to see in the world. So.
Thanks, Sayati. And thank you all for sharing wonderful perspectives, and for all of you sitting in the hot summer and soaking all this wisdom in. I want to just leave all of you with one thing as we close this panel. I'm a true believer that power resides within us. So it's not just marketing, branding, all of you are doing a wonderful job, but all of us here, we are consumers. Make the right choice. When you choose product, challenge how the product is being placed, how branding is being done. And we have the power. So when you go to the marketplace, choose wisely.